These are staff, right?
For now. Yeah, I think they're really well done.
Has some fun. Yeah, Aaron, I did message too.
Hi, everybody. We'll get started. I'm gonna leave the back door open in case you have any late comers, but if anyone gets cold or anything, just let me know. My name is Jamie Larson. I'm the Chief Election Officer for the District of Tofino. Allison is going to be our main presenter tonight, so I'll let her introduce herself in a minute, but just to do a little round of introductions. Tonight with us we have Cynthia with the ACRD. She's the Chief Election Officer for Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District. And we have Paula, she's the Manager of Corporate Services for SB 70, District 70. And in the back, Robin is our Deputy Chief Election Officer for the District of Tofino. Right, come on in. We do have a few things available on this table here, so if you didn't get a brochure, you're welcome to grab one. Some really good information put together from election. You're out in an association on things to know if you're considering running for council. And then I have for the Tofino election specifically, just a little handout there with key dates and milestones. And then if you're the note taker type, we've got some pens and paper there for you too. And some water just behind Allison here, so if anyone does get thirsty, help yourself. But Allison, I'll let you go.
Thanks. First of all, thanks for coming. My name is Alison Hasker. I'm a recovering elected official. Spent that's a my card line, by the way. I can't claim to, but I am recovering. I spent 3 terms on my council in the District of Central Santa Cruz, just halfway between the Ferry and Victoria, and very well farm line. You go through. So I spent 2 terms as a councillor and as mayor, and it's a pretty interesting time. I'm also a registered professional planner, so I'm still a registered planner, and I work for the city of Manila for 10 years and for other local governments along the way too. And I kind of describe myself as an accidental politician. I just kind of, it fell into it, you know, I didn't really plan. In fact, I wasn't sure that I was very well suited to the role, but there I was, 3 terms of office, and here I am now. And so I spend most of my time these days working with councils and staffs and local government across the province. I've almost worked in 100 municipalities and regional districts and First Nations across the province. It's just really been, I've been very lucky, had a really interesting career. Do a lot of strategic planning, a lot of teaching for Capilano University, University of Victoria, University of Alberta. And these sessions I really love because I'm hoping to do 2 things. One, to kind of inspire you to take on the job, and then also though to lend a little reality to what a tough job it is. And you probably already know that, you know, our system of government depends very much on having good people be elected officials. And so that's what I'm hoping will happen in these sessions. Come on in, is they can get a little taste. Welcome to come up. A little taste of kind of my experience and what the job's like. And so I'm going to talk about mostly kind of the municipal side of things. I will touch on the regional district, but Cynthia's going to talk about the ACRD, and then they followed with the school district, because these elections all happen at the same time, right? I bet if you're like me, you have all kinds of questions about, you know, elected office and municipal government in general, because first of all, there's a whole language around it, and there's all kinds of words that you probably don't understand. And so I'll try to touch on some of those tonight, things like, you know, closed meetings and camera meetings, conflict of interest, all that kind of stuff. I'm just going to touch on some of those things, but I think it's fair to say that most people come to this job, particularly in smaller communities, with not a lot of prior knowledge, and the learning curve is very steep. And we'll try to just demystify a little bit of this. Let me ask you though, right off the bat, any questions at the top of your mind anything you'd like to make sure that we talk about tonight? And this, by the way, will be way more interesting if you guys ask questions. So you don't just listen to me drone on.
You mean outside what's on that list?
Well, anything on that list that is.
Yeah, conflict of interest on the,
Yes, yeah, okay,
it's the last question though.
yeah. I'm gonna talk about that very generally because I'm not a lawyer, but I do, it is something that I think people should be aware of when they, are thinking about running for office, because you get yourself into a heap of trouble.
Well, especially in a small town.
Especially in a small town, yeah. Anything that's on the top of your minds that you think, oh my God, I really don't know anything about that? Okay, well, I really,
Is it what I missed?
wait, not much.
Yeah,
I
great.
think you can catch up.
Please.
Okay. I'm gonna just talk a little bit about where local government gets its authority from. We'll spend some time talking about the roles and responsibilities. This is really, really important to know kind of who does what in the local government world. I'm gonna give you my take on what the job really looks like and what's involved. Talk a little bit about, financial stewardship and decision making. That's a huge part of the role of elected officials in BC. Ethics, conduct, and legal responsibilities. This is how you stay out of trouble section. And then Jane, you gonna talk a little bit about running for office?
I do have a presentation on sort of the key things to know for Tofino specifically.
Perfect.
Mhm.
And then questions, but again, I welcome questions too. I'd like to sort of suggest that you right off the bat, ask yourself like why you're running for office. What's your motivation? What is it that you hope to achieve while you're in office? I think that 4 years is a long time. And really thinking about what your motivation is, I think can be really helpful. My experiences with elected officials in BC is that, most people are really wanting to run because they want to do something for their community, right? They want to give something to the community. It's a role of service for sure. Maybe you think it's an honorable role. I happen to think that being an elected official is an honorable role. Maybe the media doesn't, maybe lots of the public don't think, but it's a super important role in our society. Maybe you want to be a role model, as a leader in your community. That was an important role for me. I wanted my kids to see me as a community leader. I thought that would have a good effect on, had a very positive effect on my daughter, a very negative effect on my son. He'll never do it. And maybe you just know that we need really good elected officials to make our, government run and therefore our communities run. And you might also just want to leading change in the community. Okay, it's time for a different approach. There are some reasons not to run for council, and these are a couple that came to my mind. Is you're really just pissed off at the incumbents, that's okay to feel like that, but it's not going to sustain you for 4 years because they'll be out and you'll be in, and it'll be your responsibility. So it can be part of the motivation, but not the only motivation. If you just have a single project in mind that you want to see completed, it's an ice rink or a trail or something like that. Again, not really enough to sustain you for 4 years. If you need the money, this is not a money-making job. So go do something else if you're after the money. If you think government can run just like a business, government's like a business, but more. There's more to it. And let me just use this example. If we were in, running local government like a business, we wouldn't have fire departments because they are total money losers, right? So there's way more to government than just being, efficient and effective, which you want to be. But then there's all these value pieces that come with being a government. If you think the council member's job is an easy job, forget it. This is a really, really tough job. And it'll take a lot of time and a lot of soul searching to do it well. If you think it'll help your business or your supporters, probably won't in the end, not good reasons. So really just take a bit of time after tonight and think about, well, what's really motivating me? Why do I want to do this? And what do I want to get out of it? And what do I want to give in the process of being elected official? I'm just going to talk a little bit about, kind of a model of government in Tofino and in the region. First of all, just to talk about like, where does local government get its authority from? And in Canada, the Canadian Constitution divides up responsibilities between the federal government and the provinces. And Section 92 gives responsibility for local government to the provinces. So the federal government actually doesn't have any responsibility for local government. All the responsibility and authority rests with the province, pretty much. So you'll often hear people say that local governments, come on down. There's a couple of seats up here if you want.
Thank you.
If you often hear people say that local governments are the future of the province, and that is in fact how, where local governments get their authority from. It's actually delegated authority from the province. And, you may be aware that the province in the last 3 or 4 years has passed some fairly significant legislation that basically tells local governments what they're gonna do, especially around housing. And that's the province asserting its authority over local government. If the province doesn't like what local government's doing, it can just take the authority away, or it can demand local governments to do certain things, because the local government isn't actually an order government. It gains its authority from the province. And I just have two pieces of legislation that you just might want to be aware of. One is called the Community Charter, and one is called the Local Government Act. These are the two major pieces of legislation that give direction to local government in BC, and the charter is where local government gains its authority, and all the rules around councils and kind of what council's responsibilities are all articulated in the Community Charter. And then the Local Government Act is where all the legislation around regional districts, land use planning, and elections rests. And you might ask yourself, well, why do we have two pieces of legislation? And that's because during Premier Gordon Campbell's time, they started a whole process of reform. And they took what was called the Local Government Act. They took some of it out and reformed it, created the Community Charter, and they were gonna keep going. And then they kind of lost steam. So we ended up, most provinces only have one piece of legislation. In British Columbia, we're special. So you're never reading these things, but you might want to go and look at the table of contents of both of them and say, oh, that's where this stuff is. Because that's where all the guidance is. And if you get elected, you'll have to pay attention to what those acts are. Oops. So I just like to go back to the actual act and show you what the Community Charter says is the purpose of local government, of municipalities in BC. And there are these 4 things: provide good government to the community, provide services and laws, steward the public assets, so all the roads and pipes in the ground and water and all that kind of stuff, and then foster economic, social, and environmental well-being of the community. So that's what the law, the legislation says municipalities are supposed to be doing. In reality, though, what municipalities do, really, they do 2 things. They provide services to residents and businesses, and they act as a forum for residents and businesses to express their points of view and what they want, what they don't want. It's a governance mechanism. That's really the heart of it. So if you think about Tofino, all the services, including this hall, I assume the hall is a municipal community hall, right? It's a service to the community. And then the elected officials, you try to translate the views of the people and the businesses in the community. And the role of city council is the council is the governing body. So, it's actually, Tofino's actually called the Corporation of the District of Tofino. It's actually set up as a corporation, and the elected council is effectively the board of the corporation. And they are the governing body of the corporation. And so council adopts bylaws and policies, it appoints a CAO, and we'll come back to that in a minute. Adopts an annual and 5-year financial plan every year, and a 5-year capital plan. All of the financial decisions are the, the work of the council. Of course, council adopts an official community plan by bylaw, zoning bylaws, a whole raft of other regulatory bylaws. And then there's this role of liaising with the public and hearing what the public has to say, and then advocating to other levels of government on behalf of the municipality. So that kind of in general terms is the job of the council. Any of that surprise anybody? Any questions about that? You already know all this, yeah.
Is it pretty common for small communities or mid-sized communities to be run as a corporation rather than something else?
They're all municipalities in BC are set up as corporations. And there was, it's a really kind of there's an interesting history for this, that when municipalities were set up in BC, they were set up to have this model of a corporation. So it's not a parliamentary system, right? It's not like the province and the federal government. You don't have a government and an opposition. In fact, we hardly have parties. There are a few exceptions in BC, Vancouver, City, Vancouver, there are parties, right? Don't have parties, so there's no government and opposition. They're actually set up as a corporate board.
Okay.
Yeah, so really, and that was done very intentionally.
What was the intention of that?
Sorry?
Is it just to create like a unified board structure? Or to do with?
No, I think, at the time, in the early part of the 20th century, at the time, there was sort of an ideology that this is how you would make local governments be very efficient and effective. They thought that this sort of corporate model was the way to do it. And at the time, the work of municipalities was much simpler. It was about service to property. So roads, water, sewer, sidewalks, parks, that kind of stuff. And there was just a general, at least this is my reading of the BC history. It's just an ideology that they thought that was the best way to do it.
Is that still thought it was the best way? Is it still the going idea, or are there more?
I think it's just accepted. We just accept it.
Yep.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting to have a debate about that, but, I will say on this point, there has been very much resistance to a party system in local government in BC. And you'll notice that the senior, or the parties like the Conservatives and Liberals, NDP and others, Green Party, they don't really play a role in local government, though there has, in this election, the Conservatives have decided to set up some systems that would get people elected, and the NDP has done too at times, but
Sorry, in the Tofino municipal election,
no, in PC, broadly.
in
So
municipal elections.
in the municipal election, yeah. So, but there's the people at the people level, there's been real resistance that in my time in local government, real resistance to party interference in local government.
Through the union movement, if when people are debating here, there was a strong crossover. I do come from the city.
Yeah.
Strong crossover, like in specific the NDP and there were long-standing parties throughout Vancouver's history, actually a little more.
You mean there are people who are members of political parties who run for local office? That we mean?
Resources are more organized. So I grew up in a small town for 20 years. It's the same people and the same leaders organize the resources. So I found that quite common.
Yeah, you don't see, maybe it's a matter of semantics, you do not see, and in fact, the campaign financing rules really have an effect on this too, but you just don't see funding going to candidates. You don't see somebody running saying, I'm representing the NDP
I thought
in the local government,
donation of labor still through unions was actually quite a bit of
not in local government.
is that provincial?
Definitely,
Where you
And
need
federal.
labor?
yeah,
Okay.
but, and the local government, I mean, has anybody, let me ask you, has anybody in Tofino run under a party label? Yeah, it's very unusual. I mean, it happens, but it is unusual. There are people who are strong, party members that run for elected office, they just don't run under the banner. And I think, you know, what, and I think residents have really, this, again, I'm not speaking about Tofino, but broadly in my experience.
There's one that I fish and and also I'd have to go back and research, but that was more of the law than the secret religious.
Yeah, it could be really.
Right?
Yeah. It's a very different system though, from the provincial and federal, models, very, very different, and it functions differently too. Whoops. Come on, you can do this. Sorry. So Cynthia's gonna talk about this more later, but I just wanted to touch a little bit because there's, of course, this other government called the regional district. And so where does that fit in? So regional districts are federations of municipalities and the unincorporated areas. So you have, I think, six electoral areas and 3 municipalities. And they're federations, so they don't actually, regional districts don't have authority except for the authority that's vested in their members. So their federations are a little different, and they were set up a little over 50 years ago to do a number of things. One, to provide services to member jurisdictions and to serve as a vehicle that would allow different jurisdictions like municipalities and electoral areas to come together to share services. So things like regional districts, I suspect that there's some shared services between Municipal and Tofino. So before regional districts existed, it was pretty hard for different jurisdictions to work together. This enabled that. They're also the general government for electoral areas. For the unincorporated areas, and they're an administrative agency for a whole bunch of purposes, primarily sort of debt and borrowing. But again, their authority comes from their members, not from a delegation of authority. So Tofino's relation, and you know, correct me if I'm wrong, but this was based on my research. So Tofino's relationship with the ACRD, waste recycling services, emergency support services, and regional collaboration, is that correct? Okay, good. I didn't read that. But Cindy can talk about this. She's the expert. Any questions about that? I would say that regional districts are really broadly misunderstood in BC as is a bit Byzantine. I think Tofino just has 1 rep on the board. Right. So roles and responsibilities of elected officials. So if you get elected, these are some of your responsibilities. You know, the district of Tofino, there's kind of 2 sides to the house. There's the elected side of the house, and then there's the staff side of the house. So on the elected side, the job is a job of governance, right? And the focus is on setting direction and vision for the community, and making decisions and setting policy that represents the interests of your constituents. And your job is to approve budgets and plans and set priorities, adopt bylaws. And it's really a strategic role. So, you know, your job is to think strategically, long-term, listen to your constituents, make decisions. And of course, you're accountable to the electors, right? The staff side of the house, their role is to give the elected officials advice and then to implement the direction of the council. So the focus is on implementing the direction set by the council or the board. The role is to manage day-to-day services and programs, again, consistent with the direction of the elected officials. Responsibilities include delivering services efficiently, effectively, managing staff and resources, implementing policies and bylaws. Very much an operational approach. And the staff are accountable to the council through the chief administrative officer. So you can see it's very much a symbiotic relationship. It's a partnership between the elected officials and the staff. The council, all the decision-making authority rests with the elected officials. And it's staff's job to implement those decisions. And if all is going well together, they're running a really great local government. Any questions about that? This is absolutely foundational to being a successful elected official in my mind. Like you really, this division of work is really, really important, because if the elected officials start getting into the operational stuff, they think it's their job to fix the potholes or, you know, be right down in the detail, you end up in trouble. And if you have the staff intruding into the decision making, then you're gonna have trouble too, and you end up having lots of conflicts. So the separation of responsibilities is really important.
I kind of do have a quick question, if it's, so you kind of talk about it as quite an equal relationship and it's presented that way.
It's probably an equally important relationship, but all the authority rests with the elected officials. Yeah, totally.
Totally really work.
And you know, I think it's common for the elected officials not to realize that actually they are in control. And within the, you know, the limits of the law, they can do it as a group, as a collective, they can make the decisions to do what they want.
It's excellent piece of that.
And, you know, I would say that there are times that, I'm not speaking of Tofino, but I have been in communities where the council is, frequently it's because they're divided and they can't function well as a collective, and so they're weak.
Corporates and non-for-profits aren't necessarily as direct as 20 years ago. There's pluses and minuses to that, but one of the minuses is almost a lack of understanding. You're saying even some councillors see this.
Yeah.
But it's 100%, thanks
Yeah.
for being clear.
Yeah, so I do think, I mean, this is part of thinking about if you want to be an elected official, you have to be prepared to take on that responsibility. Take on that authority, because you can't just go and kind of float along for 4 years, because the organization will end up in trouble. I'll just tell you one story. I was in a community just maybe 6 months ago, and it was one of these communities where the council was very divided, had some very strong personalities on it, and they were not working as a collective at all. And I was aware of this before, and so almost the first thing I said to them when I walked in the room was, I said, I just want to tell you that you have absolute authority and control to do whatever you don't want within the limits of the law. And they laughed. Oh. That's. I thought, okay, we got a problem here. Problem. So that does happen. So again, just talking about what governance means, you know, in terms of being a council, that I see this as being 4 big buckets of responsibility. The first is setting the strategic direction. So it's setting the priorities, maybe adopting the official community plan, which is basically the roadmap for the community, right? Setting that strategic direction, deciding what's important. And then all of the financial, you know, where you're spending tax money, that's all the responsibility of the council. Allocating both, you know, staff time, so what do you want the staff to be spending time on? And what are you gonna spend the actual money on? And then there's a whole oversight and reporting role, so making sure that you're accomplishing the things that you want to accomplish. So if you set strategic priorities, you're making progress over the 4 years, how is that going? Oversight of the chief administrative officer, and then reporting out to the constituents every year. So by law, you have to produce an annual report, and you report out on your progress. And then there's a whole managing risk bucket of things that you're responsible for. It might be legal risk, or, you know, managing your assets, making sure that your assets are in good shape and keeping the risk to the corporation and to the community down low. So that's kind of how I see that at a high level, what governance means in terms of elected, council. So the role of city council, governing body, adopts policies, appoints the CAO, adopts financial plans, fish and meat plans, zoning bylaws, regulatory bylaws. And so I'm just gonna talk a little bit about the role of the mayor and the role of councillors. So currently, this is what the legislation says, and there's a bill partway through the legislature which is gonna change this. We hope it'll be done by election time. So this is what the charter says now. The mayor is the head and chief executive officer of the municipality. And the proposal in Bill 17 is to remove the word chief executive officer, very corporate, all right, terminology. And again, I think that this was Gordon Campbell's influence on this legislation, but it was never defined in the legislation and became very problematic because the mayor actually doesn't have any more authority than the councillors do. So there have been cases where the mayor has thought because of this term that he or she has more power, but they don't. So that the proposal is to remove that. So, but beyond that, the mayor is to provide leadership to council. And if you can imagine, you know, you're the leader of this group of people, you have to help them facilitate their work. Communicate information to council. Often the mayor is privy to all kinds of information that the councillors aren't, so his or her job is to communicate that. If the mayor is present at a council meeting, they must actually chair the meeting, they must preside at the council meeting. And the mayor is the voice of council, so in general terms, the mayor is giving voice to council's decision to the CAO. There's ability for the mayor to appoint standing committees. This is one of the few kind of special powers that the mayor has. And the legislation currently says that the mayor has power to suspend municipal officers and employees, and that is proposed to be removed too. So council can do that, but the mayor alone can't do it. The mayor is to reflect the will of council, so even if the mayor disagrees, if council makes a decision, the mayor has to communicate that decision, not the mayor's own, point of view of things. I found that particularly troubling at times, because there were times I disagreed with my council, and yet I had to be the voice of council, so I didn't, say what they wanted. And then other duties. So in real terms, the mayor is very much equal, like the mayor doesn't have any more voting power than the members of council do. I really see the mayor's job as being this kind of soft leader job. If the mayor is really good at being a mayor, they're a motivator, a guide, a questioner, bridge builder, sometimes a clairvoyant, really a facilitator, because you're trying to get the group to be making decisions. So if the mayor is a lone wolf, there are some lone wolf mayors out there, the council's not very effective. So very much a leadership role. Facilitates the work of council. So the role of council members, like councillors, not just council members. I should let me step back, because the mayor has these responsibilities too, and then plus those other extra ones. So it's interesting, because the charter is much more vague about the role of councillors. So this is what the charter says: they to consider the well-being and interests of the municipality, contribute to the development, evaluation of policies and programs, participate in council meetings, and carry out other duties. So quite not as precisely defined, I think, as the mayor's role. But in essence, the councillor is a decision maker and a collaborator and a listener. And really successful councillors know how to work with the other people around the table. And this is a super important point, is that the authority that council has can only be expressed as a collective. So as an individual member of council, you have no power. You only have power as a collective, and this is why that collaboration is so important. You need to be able to work with people, and especially when you need to work with people that you don't like and you don't agree with. And you've got to find a way to work together, because if you're constantly fighting all the time, then you just don't get stuff done. So you just have to really learn how to collaborate. Collaborate on the things with you share and interest, and some of the other things that you're gonna have to let go of. So this notion that you don't have any individual power is so important, and it's really important in the transition from being a campaigner to being on council, because if you're all gonna run for office, which I hope you do, you will all be out there competing, right? You'll be campaigning saying, I'm the best person for this job, you know, I'm better than these people. Elect me. And then you get elected. And then your individual power is diluted because you'll be one of a collective. And that transition going from being an independent campaigner to be a member of the collective voice is really hard. And some people never make that transition. And yeah, it's a really challenging thing to do. So just one little word of advice is during the campaign, you might want to be nice to each other. Because if you start name calling and saying, this is, full of it, and he's never gonna be any good, and he's blah, 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 blah. Sometimes those things continue on after the election. So, you might wanna think about, well, what does that look like after the election if we both get elected? That's not to say that you shouldn't be spirited in your debate, but, you just have to think about what the long-term impact of really aggressive behavior on the campaign trail might do to the council in the end. So I'm going to start with, any questions about that, first of all? Yeah.
Sort of another question back to the idea of how governments are run, how are black governments versus run as a corporation. If the corporation does not grow, the board members tend to no longer be on board. If the corporation, the district of Tofino does not grow, or BC municipalities do not grow, if the numbers don't go up, then are council members removed?
Like if the population doesn't grow?
Or like, if the district or the area that the corporation is overseeing doesn't improve economically or grow or however you want to define growth in a corporate sense.
Yeah.
Does that then reflect negative on the council, who are the equivalent of the board members to that corporation? Like, can a council be dissolved if the corporation is not to be seen as growing?
No, I think what's more likely to happen is the elected official will not be elected again.
Okay,
Right?
and
Yeah.
because they're on cycle, they're just not.
Yeah.
Okay,
So the accountability is at the election time, right? And, sometimes communities grow physically, sometimes they, bring in more land into their area. Sometimes that happens, on the edges usually. And, sometimes councils themselves get bigger, so you go from a 5-member council to a 7-member council, or maybe a 9-member council, and that's, usually done, by referendum. So people decide, so for example, Falcon Beach, wanted to increase their council size, and they took it to a referendum, and people said no.
Have you ever seen a council decrease in size?
I've seen, well, there's a very interesting case right now. I have not seen them decrease in size, though I suspect that there are probably some resource communities where that's
And
happening.
it's Toronto, Doug Ford. He
Sorry?
Doug Ford, Toronto City Council in Toronto.
Oh, yeah, well,
Yeah.
Ontario's special. Ontario has a little different system than we have. Sorry?
I think you could reduce a little reduce them.
Oh, is that right?
I could be wrong, but they have
Oh.
a smaller council than we do.
Oh,
That's, I'm
okay.
pretty sure.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure it happens. The other one that's really interesting to watch is, Sayward is, working on de-incorporating. So there are a few communities in the province that I think might be better off not being incorporated. Yeah.
Two questions. One around, you said there's a lot of things that the council have to do annually by provincial law, budget, fish community plan. How much time in like a well-run city government is spent on those sort of annual must-dos versus being policy bylaws and other governance?
I think if you ask the staff, they'd say more and more all the time. There's more reporting, more provincial mandates. I don't know if I could tell you. I think, and I'm sure every community is a little different, but municipalities spend a lot of time on their annual reports now. And I mean, there was initially when they first were required to do this, which was maybe almost 20 years ago. There was a real reluctance to doing it. But if you haven't looked at Tofino's annual report, I encourage you to do so, because it is every year tells you what they've been doing in the last year, what they've accomplished. Plus it includes the financial statements, and you definitely want to look at them.
And then for bylaw adoption, typically in a municipal government, do the bylaws originate with council or originate with staff?
There's probably a little bit of both, I think. Lots of bylaws, pretty much all land use matters have to be passed by bylaw. So those would often be initiated by property owners. So they wanted to rezone a piece of property, something like that. That would be the case. Some would be initiated by the staff, like you're obliged now to review a portion of your official community plan every 5 years. So, that's the staff's world, they'll bring it to council, right? And then there probably from time to time, there are things that council really wants to do. And it would be initiated by them. Yeah.
Proposed.
Yeah, there's a seat up here, there's one back there, if you wanna join us. Yeah, I think on the first council that I was on, we were very keen to see the official community plan revised, very keen. There'd been a lot of controversy in the community, so that was very much initially driven by the council to, we wanna make this happen, it was a top priority. Yeah. Yeah, and anything else? Role of staff, so again, back to this graphic. The staff's job is to give advice to council. They're, highly professionalized staff in local government in BC. Really well qualified, we all have, chartered accountants, registered planners, professional engineers. Really, professional staff. And so their job is to give their professional advice about any number of, decisions that council's gonna make. And then, once council makes a decision, the staff will implement. And, council has no obligation to follow the advice of staff. I like to think of it this way, the staff will write reports and give their advice. And they give it to council, it gets onto the council table, council roughs it up and talks and makes their decision. And when it goes to the council table, it's not, the staff have to let it go, right? They've given their advice. And then council's gonna make whatever decision they make, they're gonna give direction to staff and staff will implement. And that, that sounds very simplistic, but it's not always that smooth, but that's how it should work. Because at the end of the day, staff aren't the decision makers. The elected officials are the decision makers. Advice and implementing decisions. I just want to talk about this a little bit, the one employee convention. Has anybody heard this term or the one employee rule? This is a convention in local government. It's pretty much consistent across Canada. Virtually unanimous in British Columbia. And if you hear somebody like, George Kopp talk or, one of the kind of leading local government thinkers talk, they will talk about the one employee rule or the one employee convention, and this is what this means. Council hires a professional chief administrative officer. And that's their one employee. All the other employees are supervised, managed, evaluated, hired, fired by the chief administrative officer. The elected officials don't have a role in hiring, firing, disciplining at that level. They have one employee as the chief administrative officer, and that's to avoid, well, it's to provide for role clarity, for one thing. That's the chief administrative officer's job, and if the staff aren't they're not performing well, then the CAO will be accountable for that. And it's to avoid, say the director of corporate services from having two masters, having a master, a chief administrative officer, and a master of council, right? Only accountable for one person, and that's the CAO. So that is the system, I think, generally considered to be the best model of kind of organization for local governments and embraced virtually across the country. And it's interesting that the United States, that's not the case. I think about 40% of them use this convention. And in other communities, there are a number of different models, but they have the strong mayor model, which is where Ontario has gone, right? But in Canada, this is with the, Ontario special law. This is how it's organized in most cases. I just want to mention this in BC, we have a very, I think, proud tradition of a nonpartisan public service. It's not politicized. There are some exceptions where things have run amok, I think, but all communities in BC are members of the Local Government Management Association, has a code of conduct, and one of the commitments of the code of conduct is that local government public servants will serve their elected officials irrespective of their political leanings or ideology. And I just, my editorial comment on this is worth protecting, because otherwise you introduce a whole instability in the system. You get a new mayor and council, and out go the staff, and they bring in their activities. And really, we're much better off if we have a nonpartisan staff. Provides a lot of stability to local government. Any questions about the role of staff or anything like that? Okay, so what does the job really look like? Well, it's a huge time commitment. It's not just council meeting every couple of weeks or every week. There's probably committee of the whole meetings. There's commitments outside of the district of Tofino. There's the regional district. There's probably the library board. There's the Union of BC municipalities. There's the Association of Vancouver and Coastal Communities. There's probably, I bet in Tofino there's 100 not-for-profit organizations, right? There's probably tons of them. And there's liaison roles. There's a huge amount of reading involved in the agendas. Jamie, can you tell me how many pages your last agenda was?
I think it had an engineering report on a source water assessment, so I want to say it was close to 300, between 200 and 300.
And do you have 2 council meetings a month?
2 council meetings on average a month, plus 1 committee of the whole every 6 weeks or so.
Okay, so probably about 3,
Mm-hmm.
council-like meetings.
Yeah.
And 300 pages of agendas. And probably the regional district's worse. Is it?
There's something, yeah.
Yeah, it's on. So there's just, if you're thinking you're taking on something that's gonna be, one night every couple of weeks, it's just generally much more than that. Plus, I will just say, when you go grocery shopping, it takes way longer. People wanna talk to you. You become visible and people wanna talk. And yeah, there's lots of relationships to manage and you spend a lot of time with people. And you really have to balance your governance responsibilities with your personal and professional responsibilities and obligations, right? And sometimes that can be really tricky. You know, depending on what you do for a living, it can really be a challenge. So you really want to think about how you manage that and so that your life doesn't get out of control. You might have media engagement obligations, right? Like just showing up to things and listening to people if they're public meetings or town halls or engagement over some issue, like, you know, you want to show up for those things. And there's a lot of attention these days on stress management and resilience for elected officials, because I think, you know, in real terms, it's become a more difficult job than it was 20 or 30 years ago. You'll make lots of really tough decisions, land use and development decisions. These are some of the most difficult decisions to make. And, you know, they affect people personally. And there's, you know, most often not just an easy right or wrong answer. You just have to figure out what is the best answer. But it can be really, really stressful. You've got all these decisions around infrastructure and capital planning. I was thinking as I was driving up about Tofino's water challenge, right? Like this is a big, this is, you know, what some call a wicked problem, right? And, you know, whatever you do, I bet you it's gonna cost a lot of money, right? And it'll be a stressful. I think you just had a report, Jamie, I think you told me, right? So I haven't read that, and I don't know what it said, but because we talked a while ago about this, yeah, so.
The treatment facility in the defense of everybody in the district did a great job, everybody did a great job, it was brought in, what? I think it was a big capital budget. There was a wastewater treatment center built for 80-90 million, something like that, just.
But we're talking about water.
No, I understand.
Water supply.
I'm saying like, people can get out.
Yeah, good. Good. Those are often the most challenging because they just cost so much money, those big infrastructure decisions. You have to make all the budgeting and taxation decisions, so every year you gotta set the tax rates, right? You gotta figure out how much your neighbors are paying. And, you know, you're not usually Mr. or Mrs. Popular. So those are really, really challenging decisions. And then all of the whole community service and services now, which local governments are way more involved in them than they ever were in the past. Things like affordable housing. In fact, I think Tofino is one of the pioneers, right? So much more complicated role than it used to be for sure. Anything that I missed there that you think makes this job challenging? Okay. You know, that's kind of the darker side of being an elected official, but it can be really incredibly rewarding job to have been. I mean, first of all, how many people do you know have been elected official, right? You know, it's not everybody does this, and to be a part of the decision making of our community is, you know, it's just really kind of a cool thing to do in your life. And you know, councils have a lot of power to make things happen. And it is fun, you know, it's fun for me to go, you know, when I'm still live in my community and go around and say, oh yeah, I was a part of that, you know, I feel good about that. There are also times that I go, oh, that was bad, I don't feel good about that, but you know, there are some things I feel very happy about, and I had an experience, just a few weeks ago at a community event where somebody, former elected official who I would have considered my opponent, come up to me and she said, you know what, that was such a great thing that you did, and you had that vision, and you know, it was really great, because it is a long time later, and I thought, oh, okay, well, okay. So it really is it's a really and it's an amazing thing to do in your life, and you can really have impact in a way that you can't outside of elected office, because you really do have power to make things happen. So you just hope that those are good things that you make happen. I just want to talk a little bit about financial stewardship and decision making. I like to use this word stewardship because, you know, they're elected officials before you, and there's going to be elected officials after you. And for the time that you're an elected official, you know, the community's trusted their community to you. And it's your job to look after it and to take care of it. And then you'll move on, and, you know, somebody else will take over, but for that time, you know, it's your job. It really is a job of trust, I think, and service. So here, you know, and I'm not an accountant, and I'm terrified always to do this, but I do like to read financial statements because it gives a really good insight into where the community's at. So this is 2025, and in 2025, District of Tofino took in about $23 million and spent about $20 million. And the difference probably has to do with grant money came in, and some of it got spent and all of it would be spent in the next year. That's usually what happens. But you know, $20 million is a lot of money. And this is the job of the council, is to figure out where that money goes and what you're gonna spend it on. And yeah, you get your resort municipality money, which is a bit of a bonus, right? And because you're small, the taxes are about 7.5 million of the 23 million. So a third of it comes from taxes and a third comes from other places. But this is your job. Your job is to figure out what money gets spent on. I mean, you have your financial officer will, you know, help you through this. But at the end of the day, whether you spend money on recreation or sanitary sewer, that's your decision. Right? Where you think the most important impact is going to be, that's your money. I'm just going to work out what fire services cost. Yeah, just for $1 million. Our fire services and emergency fund, you probably expect that's going to increase soon. This will be your world as an elected official every year. And you know, once you get elected, it's almost right away that you see the budget. It's a really cruel twist of the election time in BC. Because really, it's almost, I'm assuming that's the case here.
November 18th.
November 18th. So you get elected on October 17th, and on November 18th, you get the budget.
Which is then further developed by council, or is weird?
Well, they'll present a preliminary budget to you.
Yeah.
Preliminary budget is presented, and then you'll figure out if it,
Makes sense for that specific.
you're prepared to support it, or if you think it should change.
Okay, is that then on council to change it, or do you put it back to the accountants and the budget makers to say, try this differently and see what we come up with?
Yeah, well, either.
Okay,
Often, you'll say, well, do you present a range of options generally? Like, in tax increases? This is
Exactly.
What
Yeah.
you can do at 3%, this is what you can do at 5%,
Exactly.
this is what you can do at 8%
Yeah.
increase.
okay.
And councils usually wrestle with that. This is the other one. Oh, shoot. No. Yes, I just want to show you this one. These are the tangible capital assets. So these are all the things that the municipality owns, right? So $118 million worth of capital assets. And these are, I believe, depreciated assets. But you know, all of that, $118 million. Like. Since the incorporation of the municipality, you know, that's all been paid for by taxpayers and maybe some government grants and stuff, but that's taxpayers' money there. Pipes in the ground. Community facilities, roads, streetlights, sidewalks and everything. And if you think back to that community charter slide, one of your responsibilities was to manage the capital assets of the or assets of the community. So this is a very important part of the job, is to make sure that those assets are looked after and that there's adequate funding to maintain them. And broadly across BC, local governments haven't done a great job of this, so everybody's got some kind of an asset deficit. And everybody's kind of scrambling. So, you know, a big chunk of value in those capital assets. And I assume that that's part of your budget process now. You have a component for asset management, right?
We do, yeah.
Sorry, Jamie, I don't mean to put you on the.
That's
spot.
okay.
Once you get elected, you will probably be involved in a priority setting, strategic plan process at the beginning of your term, often kind of early in the new year. And the council will get together, usually with some kind of facilitator, to lay out a plan or priorities for the term of office, including like core work and capital asset management, that kind of stuff, but to really identify the priorities. These are the things we want to achieve in the 4 years. And you lay out a plan, and then in an ideal world, you roll it out and implement it. And usually a couple of days or a day and a half or a day or
I think usually a couple days.
a couple of days.
Yeah.
Right. And I just really encourage you to take us seriously, because this begins to give the direction to the staff of what the council wants to achieve in its term of office. We're just going to talk about briefly how municipal services are financed. So they're financed through a combination of local taxation, user fees, sometimes they're developer contributions, and then government transfers like your resort funding. And municipalities are legally required to pass a balanced budget every year and a balanced 5-year financial plan. So municipalities can't run a deficit. They can only spend annually what the money that they have for operations. So very kind of disciplined financial legislation. And I just want to say that, you know, every decision has, you know, ethical and philosophical and ideological and value-based components to it. And that's why, you know, you just think about your financing, you know, do we fund a facility for homelessness, or do we fund an upgrade to a sewer pump? Or do we build a new play park for young kids, or do we install some new streetlights? Now, there are no right and wrong answers to these things. It's their value judgments, and your job is to kind of figure that out and to weigh, you know, what your capacity is, and to weigh the risk. You know, what are the consequences if we don't do this? If we don't upgrade that sewer pump, what are the consequences of that? What are the risks associated with that? So, you know, lots of people, I think, have not been elected office, think these are easy decisions to make. Some of the decisions are easy to make, but lots of them are really difficult to make. And there's not necessarily a really good answer. When you get elected, you swear an oath, and probably will look like something like this. This is the standard oath from the province. And it says things like, you'll work within the law, like you need to function, you know, do things that aren't illegal. That you'll abide by the rules related to conflict of interest. You'll carry out your duties with integrity. And you'll be respectful. You know, and you swear this oath, you make this commitment, right? So I just encourage you to take this seriously and remind yourself of it over the term of office. I just want to mention this because responsible conduct is a big topic of conversation in local government these days. Because there have been some bad actors, so you might have heard of Kamloops or Say Word or so there's this group called the Working Group on Responsible Conduct. So it's a coalition of the Union of BC Municipalities, Local Government Management Association of the province. They created a bunch of documents. This is the foundational principles: integrity, accountability, respect, leadership, and collaboration. And they are the driving force behind the new legislation that I was talking about, Bill 17. So I think my next slide tells you this. Whoops. If Bill 17 gets through the House, there will be a province-wide code of conduct and required content. So every municipality will be required to have a code of conduct. And this will probably be, right along with the budget, one of the first things you have to deal with. For complaints, you'll be required to hire an independent investigator. They've laid out a list of penalties that you can apply in response to complaints. And these two things that I mentioned earlier, mayors and regional chairs they're gonna lose the power to suspend staff on their own, and mayors will no longer be CEOs. So there are some changes coming, and I think we all hope that people make the codes of conduct better. Yeah. Any questions about that? Yes.
What's the timeline on that bill right now?
It's about halfway through, and I think they're hoping for it to go back to the House in October. And I'm hoping that it will be passed, and they're working on regulations that will be the enforceable part of it now, so that it'll be ready to launch. So I think all of it was supposed to be done in February, but the province got a bit distracted. We're hoping that it'll be done by inauguration day. Jamie, what is inauguration day for you guys?
In Tofino, it is, November 2nd, the Tuesday.
In an ideal world, but if not, it'll come soon after that. Yeah. So how to get stuff done? So everything that council gives direction to have done has to be passed by resolution or bylaw. You know, just because somebody at a council meeting says, "Oh, it'd be a really good idea to do this," it's meaningless. No action will be taken. Council actually has to make a decision by resolution or bylaw. Has to get on a council agenda first, then has to be an actual decision. And in municipalities' case, most decisions are just made by a simple majority. There are a couple of exceptions to that, but just, 4 or 7. That's so if you have something you really want done, you have to get 3 people to agree with you. So that you have a majority, and then you can move something forward. This is why collaborating is so important. Because one voice just doesn't do anything. And I'll let Cynthia talk about regional districts, a much more complicated voting system. But in councils, basically majority rules. Yeah, and some things, what's the difference between a resolution and a bylaw? A resolution is just a simple decision of council. Somebody moves a motion, seconded, there's a vote, and it's done. And that, will give it full authority. But there are lots of things that are required by law to be bylaws. So almost all land use decisions are made by bylaw. And the difference really is it's a much longer process. There's usually multiple steps, 3, 4 steps. And a series of decisions and time in between the decisions, so just more important decisions and more steps involved in the process. And then closed meetings in BC, the legislation is that all your work of council is done in view of the public, so everything is done in public. That's the default, that's where you start, and then there are a few exceptions. And they are, you know, some labor personnel items, so if you're dealing with a, you know, you're hiring your CAO or you're letting your CAO go, all of that's gonna be done in a closed meeting. That's to protect the corporation from risk. Some legal items, not all legal items, but some, so if you're in litigation and you're receiving advice from your solicitor, that can reasonably be done in a closed meeting. And then some land items, so say you were wanting to, the municipality wanted to buy a piece of land and you were talking about how much you're prepared to pay for it, well, you want to do that in a closed meeting because you don't want your competitor to know how much you're going to pay for it. So there are some land matters that you can have in closed meeting. And when you have a closed meeting, you have to give public notice you're having a closed meeting and you have to cite which exception you're holding it under. So you have to say, we're dealing with a land acquisition matter, a personnel matter. You actually have to tell the public that that's what you're doing. And then if at the conclusion of your work, you're in a position to release information about the decision. So say it was about an acquisition of a piece of land. Once you bought a piece of land, you rise in the report and you tell the public this is what we did. And I think the more you can do that, the better off you are. Because it's really a matter of trust, you know, the public hates closed meetings, right? I don't like that. What are you doing? What are you doing without us being able to see? And conflict of interest, you know, if you're elected, you will get lots of training about this. So this is just a once over lately, as I said earlier, not a lawyer. But if you have a direct or an indirect pecuniary interest in decision, you're really, it's in your best interest to declare that you've got a conflict of interest and remove yourself from the meeting. And you can't, you need to remove yourself from the meeting, not go back in and not talk to any of the councillors about the item until it's completely concluded. So, this is a disqualifiable offense, so if you're found to be guilty of a conflict of interest, you can be removed from office. And while I was in office, our neighboring municipality, one of the councillors was removed from office for this. So it's really something that you want to be aware of. You sometimes need to get some good advice about, your own legal advice about, and make sure that you don't end up in hot water. And then the other thing I just wanted to mention here is bias. So, and this is important in the campaigns. The courts have said, this is a quote, elected officials are expected to have an open mind, not an empty mind. So during the election, you might want to think twice about saying like that, I will never vote for this. I will never vote for this rezoning. I will never vote for this budget item, because the courts have said you need to go into the process of decision making with an open mind. They might say something like, you know, I just don't think that rezoning is in the best interest of the community. You know, but I'm prepared to, you know, hear what others have to say about it, and we'll make a decision. So the risk is that if you're too declarative, somebody will take your report and say, well, you had a closed mind and you weren't open to hearing from the public. And then the bylaw could very well be in jeopardy. So during your campaign, you want to be just not too declarative. Have an open mind. And I really believe this, you know, you're from a diverse community, you got different ages, different ethnicities, you've got different socioeconomic groups in your community. You want diversity around your table because you'll make better decisions in the end. It makes the decision making harder, usually. But a diverse council is usually a stronger council. So even though if you have different different opinions around the table. It's not a bad thing at all. It's really probably in the interest of your community to have diversity at the table. Really encourage you to know your moral compass, like to know for yourself what's right and wrong, because it'll probably be tested. You'll probably be leaned on and courted, and people will try to persuade you of this and that. And you might really wanna do some soul searching before you get elected, to know kind of where your boundaries were. Yeah. If you haven't read your official community plan, you ought to. This is super powerful document, even more powerful in the last few years. Because of some of the provincial legislation that's come down, and it really lays the roadmap for your community for 20 years or more. And it is intended to be an expression of the residents' desire for their community. This is where we want this community to go. And you know, it has goals and objectives. There's a part of the legislation that says council can't make a decision that's in conflict with the official community plan. I mean, they can amend the official community plan if they want to make a change. You can do that, but it can't make a decision that's not consistent with it. So it's just a super powerful document. This was what I have is 2021, but we probably amended it with some housing stuff since then. There are probably amendments. For this
Yes,
fund.
yeah, I think two have passed and one is going through its readings, so it's in front of council.
Yeah, and is it up for an overhaul? Maybe not.
I don't know the timeline, actually. I'm not sure.
Probably everybody got burned out with the housing.
Mhm.
But this, if you haven't read this, you should read this. So really, it is the roadmap for the community. Just a couple of things before I pass it off to Cynthia in the school district. Really understanding the roles and having role clarity, super important, to really feel comfortable with that. Be prepared to, uphold, good conduct, foundational principles of responsible conduct. And the council as a whole should not tolerate bad behavior. It's up to council to manage its own behavior. So, when somebody is not behaving well, you need to be able to manage that and to step in. At the beginning of your term, really ensure good orientation and training. I'm sure you guys have got this all planned out. It's a lot to take on, and you really want to make sure that you have the learning opportunities that you think you need. Be honest, ask lots of questions. Support the strategic planning process. Selecting those priorities for your term is a really important step towards being successful. Be sensitive to and aware of the 4-year term of office. Like big things should be started at the beginning of the term, not at the end. So make sure you really plan out your work carefully and thinking about what you don't want to get caught up in the next election. Do those things first. You're working in a world of compromise, right? I mean, there's 7 of you around the table. Like, you gotta find what you can agree on, right? And compromise will be involved for sure. The diversity thing and respect the democratic process. You're not always going to be on the prevailing end of the decisions, and you'll be well served by learning to live with not getting what you had wanted. Say, okay, well, for the council, they decided that that's what they wanted to do. Okay, here we go. If you keep relitigating decisions that you were not on the prevailing side of, it just is really not very productive. And it's a long 4 years. What do I think It takes to be a good council member, really good listening skills. And you gotta be able to listen to people and what they have to say. And the ability to process a lot of information. Like, if you have a 300-page agenda, you need to develop, a way of processing that information, figuring out what's most important, what you really have to pay attention to, what you can just trust staff on. But finding a way, a system that will work for you. You have to have a commitment to the law. Commitment to good conduct. Clarity of purpose, knowing, just back to that very first question I asked you, like, why are you doing this? Why are you thinking of running for office? Really having a clarity of purpose and knowing that why you're there and what it is that you want to do or give or achieve. I think you ought to have really high ethical principles and not get yourself caught up in nefarious work. And it's hard work, so you gotta be prepared to work hard and put in the time. It's a really steep learning curve, I just sort of skimmed the surface here. It's a very steep learning curve. I was involved initially with UDCM in their training program, so at the beginning of the term, there are workshops offered across the province, and after 2.5, 3 days, I would see newly elected officials walking out just completely glazed over, saying, oh my God, what did I get myself into? Because there's just a lot to take in. You'll be fine in the end, but it is a lot upfront, and the budget doesn't help, and a new code of conduct won't help. So I encourage you to think of this as a learning experience over the 4 years, and there are lots of really, really good opportunities to learn. So you're gonna get post-election orientation, probably be some in-house, there might be some external people brought in. LGLA stands for the Local Government Leadership Academy, which is an organization, not an organization, that delivers training for elected officials right after the election. And I think the local one, I think, is in Nanaimo this year. Nanaimo. So 2.5 day kind of thing there. Really encourage you to go to that if it's funded by the municipality. And really a great opportunity to learn again some of the basics and to meet other elected officials. And you'll develop relationships that will serve you well over your term of office. Then you'll have a strategic planning workshop. That's a fantastic opportunity to work with the staff and figure out what you want to do and what needs to be done over the term of office. There'll be next fall, a UDCM conference. And every year LGLA holds a leadership forum, very topical information. Both of those are just excellent opportunities to learn, to meet ministers from the province, to hear what other municipalities are doing, really to look at those as learning opportunities. And then you're on the kind of in-house stuff, there'll be in-house sessions, learning sessions along your term, but then also check-ins on your strategic plan process. So how are you doing? What have you accomplished over the term? So if you really think of this as an opportunity, not just to learn up front, but to keep learning all the time, you'll find the job more satisfying, I think. There's lots of good resources out there. Elections BC, of course, province of BC. The Union of BC municipalities, if you just go into their website, have what they call fact sheets. So they're like 1-2 pagers on a whole bunch of topics, the budget process, codes of conduct, land use planning. They're just a fantastic source of information. And of course, the charter and the local government, like I said, just take a cruise through the table of contents. Ellie Mina is a registered parliamentarian that does a lot of work in local government. So he has a fantastic website with all kinds of information about meeting procedures, bad behavior and managing bad behavior. Really good. And if you're interested in the whole open meeting, closed meeting topic, the ombudsperson has just revised, a really good guide on, open meetings in local governments, often a big topic of concern. Okay, I think that's it for me. You're gonna go about election and then we'll turn it over to Cynthia.
Yeah, exactly. I have a few slides that I'll share and then Cynthia, I'll kick over to you.
Any questions about any of that? Anything you wanna argue with me though?
Am I paying those words?
Allison, so my name is Jamie, I'm the Chief Election Officer for the District of Tofino. And I stood up these slides today to share some logistical details if you are thinking about running for office. So some key dates, some key time commitments specifically for Tofino's election, so for mayor and council. So this is a little bit of an overview of what I'm gonna share. So high level, what you should expect as a potential candidate running into Tofino's general local election in October, eligibility requirements, where to start with becoming a candidate if you should choose, how to file your nomination packages and your nomination forms, what's in a nomination package, what you can expect, and then key dates and deadlines, as well as some contact information at the end. So like Allison said, there is a lot to learn in the first few months. We've got a fairly substantive new council orientation schedule beginning actually before the swearing in ceremony. So on Monday of November 2nd, all through that week, it's sort of 8:30 to 4:30, we have new council orientation. And that's really the foundation orientation that any new council will receive. And so that's a big time commitment that we can't officially require anyone to attend if someone's away, but we highly encourage everyone to be available for that time if you are thinking about running for council. So that's that whole week of November 2nd to 6th, I think. And then many other days throughout November. We have our first budget meeting, November 18th, and we have a few other council orientation sessions scheduled throughout that month as well. The elected officials workshop, so like Allison shared, the LGLA section comes up pretty quickly in the new year. We've got strategic planning scheduled for January or February, and that's usually a 2-day session. And then we also schedule throughout the year sort of some governance check-ins as well. So these are sort of lunch and learns to keep council on track, if you will, just instead of sort of fire hose orientation style in November. We schedule these reminder sessions so that more can be absorbed throughout the council term. And then our agenda packages can sort of on average range on the low end goes from 70 pages to the high end up to 300 pages. If we have really technical reports included on those, and you've got about 4 or 5 days to digest them. So our council agenda packages are published on a Thursday by noon, and then the council meeting is the following Tuesday at 4:30. And so that's the time that you'll see the agenda package by noon on Thursday. And then you have until the council meeting at 4:30 to digest that. And then a 4-year term for Tofino's election. Our meetings generally range from 2 to 4 hours depending, and 2 to 3 per month. As well, we have a number of council select committees, so those are internal advisory committees. Public art advisory, recreation advisory, council grandstanding committee, there's a host of them and they have council members appointed to them. As well as the external appointments. So Allison mentioned, I think, there's the library board, the Vancouver Island Regional Library Board, the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District has a council member appointed, so there are some external bodies as well. And then to be eligible to run for municipal office, there's a few criteria, so you have to be at least 18 years of age or older on general voting day, so that's October 17th of this year. You have to be a Canadian citizen, have to have been a resident of BC for at least 6 months immediately before filing your nomination forms. And then you can't be disqualified by any law or statute from running for local office. So where to start, if anyone is interested in running, nomination packages are now available at the district office. So you can kind of grab them by setting an appointment with me, or you can just get one from the front office during regular business hours. In those packages, you'll need to be nominated by at least 2 nominators, and they have to be eligible nominators, so they have to be eligible to vote in the election. You have to complete your nomination forms, and then there is a declaration in that package as well that you have to sign. Basically stating that you're aware of, that you understand, and you will comply with the requirements of the local elections campaign financing act. And then I have a little line here that says candidates are responsible for ensuring that the documents are true and complete and accurate. My election team does their best to go through all of the forms to ensure accuracy and completeness, and we have in the past contacted candidates to maybe clarify information or help them fill them out properly, but ultimately it is your responsibility to do those. So when filing nomination packages, there's a period of time that it's called the nomination period, where packages can be submitted. And I recommend doing that earlier in the timeframe, just in case we do catch anything in those forms that needs to be corrected or edited. You have some time to deal with it, because once 4 p.m. on the last day comes, there's no changes that can be made. That's sort of outside of our control. And I have in Tofino's history, we've had a candidate that was running be disqualified from running because one of their nominators, as it turned out, was not a Canadian citizen. So they had 2 nominators fill in their nomination forms. Turned out after the fact, they realized they weren't a Canadian citizen, and so by law, they're disqualified from being a candidate. So the paperwork there's quite a few papers to fill out, and I'm happy as CEO and my deputy Robin to meet with any candidates to go through them together if you have questions. So the nomination period is from September 1st to September 11th. So that's the period that nomination packages can be submitted. Packages are available now, so you can pick them up at the municipal office. The front office staff can give them out, or they'll come get us if you have any questions about them. They're not available online, so you do have to come up and either pick them up in person or request that they be mailed to you or something like that. And then to drop them off, it's highly encouraged to make an appointment with myself so that we can sort of go through, spend half an hour going through the forms together and catch anything that we see or answering questions that you have. So Friday, September 11th at 4 p.m. is the deadline. In the last election, I think we had someone file forms at 3:50 or something. And so it does happen. Thankfully, they were complete and there's no issues, but I do recommend the earlier the better. So in that package, there's quite a few papers. Some of them are informational to help guide you through how to fill out the paperwork. Some of them are actually nomination forms that need to be filed with Elections BC. There's a couple appointment forms. So as a candidate, you are you will have an appointment of candidate financial agent form, appointment of candidate official agent form, an appointment for a candidate scrutineer should you choose to have one. So there's some optional forms that you can fill in if you want to appoint someone else to act in those roles other than yourself. And then there's a statement of financial disclosure form. And so this outlines any assets or liabilities you hold personally. And so that is available for public inspection. And that helps for transparency in the local government to see what potential conflicts someone may have, a council member may have. And so that needs to be filed. And then candidates are entitled to a copy of the voters list. So if you file nomination forms for campaign purposes, you can request a copy of the voters list, which essentially has there's 2 of them. There's the resident electors voters list and the non-resident property electors voters list. And for campaign purposes, you can receive residential addresses and names of all of the eligible electors should you wish to campaign and hit the campaign trail. And then just some fact sheets to share information. So there's a handout on key dates and deadlines, but I've got it up here for you. So tonight is sort of the big kickoff, and then nomination packages are available. September 1st at 9 AM, the nomination period begins, so that's when you can formally submit your nomination package. September 11th at 4 PM, that period ends, and that's the deadline. And then there's a few days where someone's nomination can be challenged. And so that deadline is September 15th at 4 PM. And then there's also a little bit of a timeline where a candidate can withdraw their candidacy before we actually kick into an election. And so September 18th at 4 is the deadline to withdraw candidacy. And then we have 2 voting opportunities. So in Tofino, we've got advanced voting day on Wednesday, October 7th. And then general voting day on October 17th. We also offer mail ballot voting. So once the candidates are all declared in September, we get all of our ballots in, and then we can actually mail them out to anyone that wants to vote by mail. Those have to be in by the end of general voting day on the 17th. And then right after the election on the 17th, so both advanced and general voting days are from 8 AM till 8 PM. And right after general voting day at 8 PM is gonna be the preliminary election results announcement. And so we have a voting machine and it will run its results for us, and usually all technical issues aside, we should have something posted pretty quickly for our preliminary elections results. So you find out the night of general voting day typically what the results are. And then October 21st is something a little different. This is called the determination of official election results. So after the preliminary results are reported out, then my team will go back and we'll actually sort of reconcile everything. And we'll take our time to do that. And then once that's all done, we'll post the determination, which is the final results. And then I might have lied to you earlier, November 3rd is the inaugural meeting of council. And so this is the swearing in ceremony and it's the inaugural meeting. So that takes place at 4:30 PM on the 3rd. And it starts with the swearing in of council, and that's the official time when outgoing council is no longer in power, for lack of a better word. And new council takes over that authority. And then there's usually a few things on an agenda for you that night. Minor things like appointments to committees or external bodies and things like that. And then all throughout November, council orientation sessions. Any questions about that so far? Yeah.
With the committees, is there opportunity to review what those might be before that package, or do you sort of receive the package and make decisions and choices within the same kind of time frame?
I think there's an opportunity to share some details, yeah, with incoming council, for sure. Council doesn't have any authority, or council-elect doesn't have any authority until they're sworn in, but definitely some information on the various boards could be shared, yeah, ahead of that time. Yeah, good question, thanks.
Shane, is it customary for the mayor to meet with each of the councillors and talk about appointments and
Yeah,
before inauguration, right?
exactly.
So is that kind of what you were asking about? No, you just,
No, that's wonderful information as well. Just, yeah, I believe Tofino has quite a few committees that require council participation, and I wasn't sure if there was time for folks to review that and
Yeah.
gravitate towards the ones that might feel more interesting or what have you.
Yeah, thanks, Valerie. That's a good question. There's a distinction. So on the first inaugural council meeting, there's more of the external body appointments.
Oh, okay.
And then all of our advisory bodies, of which I think are close to 8 or something like that. Those ones will be presented to council with a report from staff, as well as a lot of details. And then usually a discussion amongst council members on who wants to sit on which board and sort of where their interests and passions lie. But yes, typically ahead of that, the mayor will be having discussions with council to try and figure that out in preparation for the meeting. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, that's it for me then. So this is my contact information. If you do want if you need any other information about the election, there's a few spots that you can find it. So we have tofino.ca/election, that's from our landing page, all things election related, and we're updating that as things become available, so you can check that out. My contact is election@tofino.ca, and then that's my phone number and extension. This presentation is gonna be available as well, so once this is done, we're gonna have a video recording of the presentation on that webpage. So you'll be able to see that as well, if anyone wants to see it after the fact. Any questions? Okay, well, Cynthia, I'll just take over to your presentation in a minute.
Promise that it can be as brief as possible. First, I'd like to acknowledge the collaborative resolution or proceedings on the Municipal territory. As mentioned, my name is Cynthia Dick. I'm the General Manager of Administrative Services for the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District and the Chief Election Officer. We'd also like to thank the District of Tofino for letting us speak tonight. And I'll do my best not to be repetitive of what was said, and also acknowledge that we are co-hosting a session with the City of Port Alberni tomorrow to provide more information about the electoral area for our local elections as well as the school district. So as mentioned earlier, the regional district has the 13 member municipalities. We have the 6 electoral areas, which are the unincorporated areas. So the one specific to the west coast is Area C, Long Beach. We also have the 3 municipalities, which includes the District of Tofino, District of Hewlett, and the City of Port Alberni. The City of Port Alberni has 2 seats on the board because of population. We were established in 1966 by the province of British Columbia through letters patent, and we're authorities governed through the Local Government Act and Community Charter. As mentioned earlier, the School Act as well as the Local Government Act, the school district can request that the local government conduct their elections on their behalf. So we have conducted the school district trustee elections. I'd also like to note that the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District has the 4 Treaty First Nations as represented on the board, and those are the Monmouth Treaty Nations. We have Blaet, Clayoquot, Echuquisset, and Ushuaia. And those director representatives are appointed through their governing bodies as well as the municipalities. And then these 6 electoral areas are the ones that we conduct the elections for. So again, as mentioned, this kind of just outlines the appointments as well as the elected officials. For the school district, the school board is governed by the School Act. The election for school district has 2 geographic areas. We have the Alberni Valley and Bamfield is the first area, and the electors in this area elect 6 trustees. And then we have the West Coast, which includes the District of Tofino, District of Hewlett, and the Long Beach electoral area. And they elect 1 trustee for a total of 7 trustees in the upcoming election. One of the questions that we received recently was, can you be a elected official on a local governing body as well as on the school trustee board? And the answer is yes, as long as they are separate authorities, and of course, as long as you meet the eligibility requirements. This is a map that shows the electoral areas and includes the treaty settlement plans. Here's a bit of an overview of the time commitment that would be required for an ACRD electoral area director. So we do have 2 board meetings per month held on Wednesdays, generally starting at 1:30. And if there's any questions regarding procedures, we have recently updated, or the board has recently updated their procedures bylaw, and it can be found on our website. So the meetings usually start at 1:30 and last about, I would say, generally around 2.5 hours to 3 hours. And when talking about agenda kits, I haven't seen one in my time being there, less than 200 pages. And they go up to, I would say, around 400. So quite large packages. But also I should note that we have every agenda item has a report cover. So an RFD, or report for information, where the staff kind of provides an overview of what the recommended action is, some of the background information, the summary, and some of the options that the board might want to consider. So in addition to the board meetings, we also have the committee of the whole meetings, and recently they have changed from having those monthly to quarterly, but really it's on an as needed basis. We also have many committee meetings held quarterly, and like the other governing bodies, we also have the internal and external committees that directors may be appointed to. For the school board, so the expected time requirements for the school district board of education, they have monthly meetings that include one public board meeting, as well as one in-camera board meeting, as well as 2 standing committee meetings. There may be other special board or committee meetings scheduled. There are also monthly school visits, conference opportunities. Some are intended for all trustees and some for specific trustees. There are other internal and external committee appointments in addition to public appearances, advocacy work, and invitations to community events. For the regional district and for the school district, so we do have our nomination packages available, and they can be received through the regional district office in Port Alberni. We also have been providing some electronically, and they can be collected by sending a message to our elections email, which is elections@acrd.bc.ca. And that is the same for the school district trustee nomination packages as well. And again, the same nomination period as outlined by the district of Tofino. We also just outlined the campaign period, which begins at 12:01 on September 19th and ends on October 17th. We included the different candidate expense limits for the regional district and school district. And more information can be found on the Elections BC website. Voting opportunities. So because we do conduct the school district trustee elections, we will have a table or polling station at both the District of Tofino and District of Hewlett voting stations. For general voting day, for advanced voting, we will also have advanced voting at the regional district office on October 7th and October 14th. And for general voting day, we will have the multiple voting locations, but it is kind of difficult to determine until we know if there is going to be an election in the electoral area. We also offer mail ballot voting, and that information will be available on our website. Another difference from the District of Tofino and the City of Port Alberni is we actually do same-day voter registration, so we don't use the provincial voters list. And more information about that can be found on our website. After the election, the inaugural ACRD board meeting is going to be November 12th, and the training sessions have been scheduled for November as well as December. We do a very comprehensive orientation session with the board members and invite the all directors to attend. The first SD70 board meeting will be on November 3rd, and trustee onboarding and orientation will also start in November. And one of the discussions was about the financial planning process, and we start that in November, and it goes right until March. If you have any questions, I will stick around for a bit later. This is my first general local election where I am the chief election officer. Heather Zenner is the deputy chief election officer, and she was actually involved in the 2022 election as well. And I believe Paula will speak to this slide.
I have one slide. But a very important QR code on there, so if you want to take the opportunity to look at that, it'll bring you directly to our candidate information guide. Which is on the school district's website. It just goes into a little bit more detail about the school district as an organization and the role for school trustees. I should start with saying that the school district is thankful for the solicitor allowing us to come and present today in the area. The school district is located on the lands, or where I work at the board office is on the lands of the Shuswap and Chestnut First Nations. My name is Paul Mason and I'm the corporate services manager for the school district. Allison has gone through in her presentation, a lot, you've covered lots actually, most of which is the same for the school district. Including things such as governance versus operations, conflict of interest, governing as a collective board, versus individuals, things like that. And Sylvia has now just reviewed the specifics of the actual election process, noting that the regional district is running the election itself for school trustee positions. School trustees play an important role in public education. As members of the Board of Education, of which there are 7, they help to set the strategic direction of the school district and make decisions that support success and well-being of all students. We have schools in Port Alberni, Banfield, Tofino, and Euclid. So many students are there and therefore many families are impacted. In the first year of this upcoming term, the next board will begin working on the next strategic plan, which will provide guidance starting in 27-28 and following onwards. I wanted to note that you don't need to be an educator to be a trustee. Boards really benefit, as you touched on with councils as well, from people having many different backgrounds, experiences and perspectives. But most importantly, everybody having a general interest in the community and in public education. If you're thinking about running for a school trustee, I do know in this upcoming election, we will at least have 2 vacancies. We also, as mentioned, have 6 trustees in the Alberni Valley and Banfield, and then 1 West Coast trustee as well. So it's really important if anyone is considering up here on the coast that there is that seat up here too. We've prepared this candidate information guide, like I said, which goes into more specifics. I don't want to go on and on about everything, but there's lots of information in there. And my contact information as well. If anyone has any questions, feel free to call me or email me. It is on this guide also. Again, I'll be here for a few extra minutes to answer any questions if you have any. And other than that, I thank you for considering the opportunity to serve the students and our communities. Appreciate your time.
So, like, you have all these resources here now it's your chance to ask questions. Any questions for the rounds about logistics or anything about running? Have we scared you off? All of these people are here to help you in the process. You know, they did a great job of talking about how complicated it is. So they're here to help you, here to make sure that your papers are right. You don't want to end up getting disqualified. That's a pretty terrible thing to happen. So I hope you take advantage of it, and I hope you'll decide to run for office. And I wish you all the best in the election and the campaign. And should you be elected, I wish you well. And I'm a total election geek, so I will be watching on election night. So, yeah. So thanks for coming, and we'll all be around if you have any questions for that. So good luck to you.